I am super excited, Expert Authority World, to have none other than B. Jeffrey Madoff on the show. He has worked with Clairol, Godiva, Gucci, Tiffany's, Victoria's Secret. He is a playwright. He's an author. He has an expansive wealth of wisdom in the film industry, the fashion industry, and I don't want to screw up anymore. There's this whole list of impressive stuff he's done over the years, but just getting to know him recently, he's really down to earth. He's really caring. He's really sharing, and I can't wait to bring him to you. I'm going to bring him up right after we thank our sponsor. Every business needs a book, including yours. Visit freebusinessbookpublishingcourse.com today to learn the 7 steps to publish and promote your nonfiction lead and profit-generating business book in 8 weeks. Once again, that's freebusinessbookpublishingcourse.com. Here he is, ladies and gentlemen, B. Jeffrey Madoff. Jeff, how are you feeling today?
I'm good, thanks. Thanks for having me on, Mario.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I know you have a wealth of wisdom to share with the film industry and live event industry, fashion, but how did you get started in the very beginning?
Birth. Uh, once I came out of my mom, I saw there was a whole world of opportunities. And that was really the inciting incident because without being born, you really can't do much of anything. So,
Absolutely.
I didn't have a master plan and I didn't have, a path I was going to follow. When things really interested me and really engaged me, and this has been true since I was a kid, I went after those things that I thought, well, God, this is really cool. This is really interesting. And I didn't think about whether I could make money from it or not. Because first and foremost was I wanted to enjoy doing what I was doing.
How important would you say it is to have that enjoyment versus just going for money? Because I feel like some people are chasing after the money and they hate what they do and then they just do it for 50, 60 years, whether it's a job or a business.
Well, for me, it's the enjoyment part is essential. That's oxygen. That's what keeps me going. That's what keeps my lungs filling up with air and my heart beating. And I think you have to ask yourself, what does success look like for me? And for me, it's being fully engaged, working on things that I have a genuine curiosity about, and working with people who I really enjoy. And, I posed the question to the class that I teach at Parsons. I'll talk to the students and to my guests and ask them what success is for them. Uh, and then, can you be successful? Can you consider yourself successful if you're making a lot of money, but as you said, you hate every day you go to work? I don't think that's success. I think that's what leads
I don't
to
either.
addiction and problems in your life.
How would you define success?
Uh, well, there's two different types of success for me.
Okay.
One is, the success in business. And success in business to me is that I have options and that I can afford to say no without catastrophic financial consequences. And in my personal life, it's loving my friends and being loved back. And
Yeah,
that's
you
what
can't
success
really
is
put a
there.
price on that. No one can buy that.
Right. That's right.
But I think there's a lot of people that have all the money in the world, but if they actually needed something, other than the staff they're paying, would someone like reach out to help them?
Right. I guess you could you could buy love, by the hour, but it's not not really what we're talking about.
Yeah. There's a lot of intangibles to life that, I think money for sure, helps facilitate it. Travel, lodging, wherever you live, it makes things nicer, but I think there's certain things that unless you have that personal connection, and for me, relationships are huge. So unless you have that personal connection, it's like what just going through the motions of life does not sound fun to me. Like in any regard, any business, whatsoever.
Oh, I think you're right, Mario. And I think that the true currency in life is the quality and the integrity and the sustaining relationships that you have throughout your life. I'm really fortunate. I mean, I have really close friends that I speak to regularly that we grew up together. And, so I know I'm in touch with lots of people that, I played cowboys with, 60 years ago. So it's great because we knew each other's parents,
Mm-hmm.
knew each other's homes, I mean, it was, and that's irreplaceable. And I think it gets harder as you get older, when you get married, when you have a family, when you're building a business, you don't have the time to hang out in the same way that you did when you were a kid. And then I miss that. I like hanging out. I think there's a real value in that. I think it's really important. Uh, and again, I think that it's so important that you get a sense of fulfillment from your work. Now, which doesn't mean that you can't have hobbies that your work finances and you get a lot of enjoyment out of that. And I also think as your life progresses or changes, when I started my first couple businesses, I wasn't married, I didn't have kids. So in taking the risks that I took, it only affected me.
And what were your
Then
first couple of businesses?
the first adult business that I started, it sounds like I was in porn, uh, but the first adult business that I started was I was a started a clothing company,
Okay.
and that was totally as a lark. Where a friend who I'm still in touch with, I don't remember not knowing him. His mom and my mom
That's
grew up
awesome.
together, and he had graduated from college a year before I did, and he said, "Look, I've saved up some money. Can you think of a gig that would earn more than bank interest?" And I said, "Well, I see what we sell in the store." And this was this little boutique. I mean, we sold like rolling papers and hash pipes at the checkout counter. It
Okay.
wasn't like this big, store, but it was a cool place in Madison, Wisconsin. And I said, "I'll start a clothing company." I didn't really know what I was talking about, and uh,
Spoken like a true entrepreneur. Yeah, I don't know what's going on. Let's go for it. We'll figure it out.
exactly, exactly. Uh, but as you know, being an entrepreneur, there's so many myths out there about entrepreneurship, and it's hard, to make a living with your ideas, to whether you're self-financing or financing through the revenues of your business or seeking outside finance or whatever. Entrepreneurship is a roller coaster ride. And
100%.
and I know a lot of people who have become extraordinarily successful financially, but who went through quite a minefield uh, as they were on that journey there. And I don't think that that ever ends when you're an entrepreneur. It's just that, some people, very few reach the extraordinary success level. Most entrepreneurs own small businesses. And, those great big ones where examples are held up, like Elon Musk. I mean, he's one in a few billion, but I wouldn't trade lives with him either.
So, speaking of the different levels of it, because I know some people, I want to be very clear with the audience that there's nothing wrong with if you want to have a local shop, there's nothing wrong with that. And I think some people think anyone who starts a business wants to have this multinational conglomerate. And there's a lot of great people I've met who that's not the case. They just don't want to work for someone else, they want to do their thing. But there are the people who want to strive for it, and I feel like a lot of them hit these walls, myself included. When I interview on shows, I love when people go, "When did you start your company?" I'm like, "Which time?" There's always like learning and growing and all this stuff going on. So what would you say separates those one in a billion, one in a million from the local business or even the mid-sized business?
Probably obsession.
Okay.
You don't build a multi-billion dollar company casually.
Okay.
And as a result, there's also a lot of collateral damage in your life as you're on the way there, meaning
Mm.
divorces, your kids, a lot of things. It takes a toll. And I think that, you have to be obsessed to build a huge company. Now, I'm not saying there's anything the matter with that. That's the choice that you make, but realize that you're going to pay for that. And
Do
there
you
are
think you can build something that big without catastrophic fallout?
no, and I don't think you can point out any examples. Well, you have to define catastrophic fallout. I'm just saying that there is a large personal cost. For some people, maybe that's offset by either the power that they gain or the money that they gain. But I think that I think it's really tough. And so I think when you build a huge business, and I have clients that have built multi-billion dollar global companies. There is an obsession with doing that. That is a necessary component because of what it takes to build a business that big. And again, that's just not for me, but that I'm happy there's people that do it. I'm happy that there's people that pioneer new areas and have that kind of obsession. I don't happen to have that. And I think that what you're talking about is really interesting because you can have a relatively small business make very good income for what you're doing. And that affords you different kinds of opportunities. But I think what happens is there's a kind of our culture puts up this mythology that you're only really successful if you've made barge loads of money, and as a result, you're not really successful if you have a small business. Well, if you're able to pretty much own the freedom of your own time,
Mm-hmm.
and you're able to associate with the people that you want to and live the kind of life that you want to, that's successful. That could mean that you have a business that does $3 million and you're taking home three-quarters of a million or a half a million a year and doing quite well with that. So not everybody has to, ascend to the level of a James Bond villain, who's looking to control the world and have billions of dollars. Uh,
Excellent response.
exactly. Yes. Are you petting your white cat in your lap now?
I have a turtle, but yeah, Spike. Yeah.
So yeah, I think that that's why it's so important to define what success is, and that, by the way, doesn't mean that your definition doesn't change over time. That's just part of being human and being on that lifelong journey.
Yeah, and what I wanted to say is I think it's such a blessing we live in a time and a place where we can casually talk about, yeah, maybe it's doing, I was going to say 5 to 10 million a year, and that's still a small business.
Yeah.
I never
Well,
once thought when I was growing up in school that, like, $1 million was like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. And now it's like, I don't even know the actual definition, but I've heard anywhere from 20 to 50 to 100 million and less than 500 employees is like a small business.
a mid-cap business, when you're in the financial world, and I position companies for sale, so I work with those companies. Mid-cap
Like
is
Lazard,
up.
right?
That's right. Up to 499 million. That's not, that's a
I don't
mid-sized company.
consider that mid-size. That seems pretty big to me.
Well, it is, it is, but it's not if you compare it to Apple or Amazon or
True.
Ralph Lauren, I mean, and there's big differences between those companies.
Yeah, and Victoria's Secret at its height, where were they? They were billions.
Oh yeah, there. I think there was somewhere between 6 and 8 billion a year, in gross revenue, and a publicly traded company, part of limited brands.
Yeah,
So, I think you have to, I think that,
it's all
uh,
relative.
yes, exactly. And relative to what you want to do, what kind of sacrifices you're prepared to make, because, the question arises, yeah, I can get X, but what do I have to give up to get it? And do I really understand what getting it is? So what are the stakes emotionally? What are the stakes emotionally in terms of that pursuit? And it's just pretty recent, uh, where the issues of mental health have become really to the forefront in our culture. So whether it was Camille, the gymnast, uh, I hope I'm not screwing up her name. I'm just blanking on it right now. Simone Biles, the
From the
gymnast.
Olympics, yeah, she didn't do the
Yes.
sixth out of seventh or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Because she had the presence of mind and bravery and probably enough support around her to realize what she had to do was take care of herself. And that was what was really important. And then I just read a thing a couple days ago. Um, Jonah Hill
Mm,
is basically taking a indeterminate leave of absence from his career. And he was very open and said that the anxiety that he's challenged with and the things he's dealing with, he realized that he really has to get himself and take care of himself first.
yeah,
And I respect that, as opposed to the person that's constantly on the go, constantly going, and they're unaware of the damage possibly that they're doing to themselves or to their family or whatever. So, I think that awareness that is growing is important. And it's like the old thing that you hear on the airplane, which is, if you're traveling with a child, put on your face mask first.
hmm,
Because if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of anybody else in your life either.
very very true. And like you said, that ripple effect. There's the people guy. I got to focus on myself, but they don't even realize what it's doing to friends, family, and people around them. I remember hearing years ago, hurting people hurt people.
Yes.
If you're, and it's unfortunate because I don't want to be like if you're toxic, because there's a lot of people who they don't even know what's going on. They just know something's not right and they don't know how to handle it. They don't know the people we know. They don't have the whatever support network. And I feel bad for them because it's like there's so many people out there that want help nowadays. But I know what it's like to feel like I'm alone. There's no one here whatsoever. Now what?
Yeah.
So they just give it. They just try whatever they want to try. No judgment on them. But it's like they're just trying to figure it out. They just don't have the right network.
Well, correct. I think that's right. So, I mean, this all ties back to what we're talking about in terms of entrepreneurship. Is I think it's also important. Goals can always be temporary,
Mm-hmm.
and you can always, move those goalposts, as they say. But I think that it's really important to discover what is it that makes you happy? What is it that makes you fulfilled? And I was very fortunate. My parents were both entrepreneurs.
Oh
My
wow.
mom and my mom and dad were retailers in Akron, Ohio. My sister Janice is a retailer. She has her own store in a very high-end women's fashion store in Charleston, South Carolina. And my sister and I were brought up in an entrepreneurial household. And what was great was it was both my mom and dad. So there was never an issue. I never had an issue with a woman being an authority figure. And I'm not talking about as mom, I'm talking about in business.
Yeah.
And so, growing up with that and with my sister starting her own business, that just seemed normal because that's what I grew up in. And, you know, I did more business than my parents ever did. Now it's also adjusted for inflation and everything else. But, I think discovering or remembering what you did when you were a kid, what made you happy, what did you do? And I used to, Mario, when I was a kid, I had a movie theater in the basement of the house, which had an 8 millimeter projector. I would get my sister's stereo, and I had a tape recorder, and I would put together both a musical soundtrack and sound effects because the films that I rented were silent.
Oh, neat.
And I would draw these posters and then have one of these, printers where I could put the print. There's like, you get these little metal bands and you stick the print. It's really tedious process. Make these posters and distribute them around the neighborhood and get 12, 15 kids, 18 kids, like the little rascals, in the basement. I'd sell popcorn and candy bars, and they'd watch the films. And I remember how much fun I had finding the right music, mixing sound effects, doing all that. And I was like 11, 12, something like that when I had that. Jump ahead. I remember it was my 30th birthday, and I was working late that night, putting together a film and editing. And I thought, wow, this is what I dug doing 20 years ago. you know, Now it's many years past that. But those were the things that were fun to me. And I think if you reflect on what do you really enjoy doing? What gives you fulfillment? What's fun to you? I've always tried to make whatever it is I do fulfill that criteria.
That's kind of surreal. I've always loved video photography, loved taking pictures, and that was just my thing, and that's why I went into video production, special effects, animation. And when you said the adult job versus the adult business versus the kid business, it was very similar with me. Mine was a Ninja Turtles flip book in I think it was Cinnamon Life, and I was like, oh my! I knew the picture was a photo, but when you flipped it, it was moving. And I was like, this is so fascinating, and I love drawing stuff like that. Another thing, I never started a movie theater. That is really cool. I loved movies. I sold the VHS back in the day when we had those, and it was one of the first business things that I go, this is how you make 100% profit. You ask for Blockbuster gift cards. You have no overhead expense. You buy them for $4 or $5, sell them for 8 or 9, and the presentation I remember in psychology class, because I always love psychology and helping people figuring out how they think. I remember having to do a presentation, and I took like five VHS here, five VHS here, and I put my whatever the project was in the center. And the first thing the teacher goes was, "What are the movies for?" I go, "I'm glad you asked. They're actually on sale. They're $5 a piece or 3 for 10. I have these." He's like, "Are you for real?" I thought he's like, "Are you for real doing this in the middle of a project?" I go, "No, they're for sale. Which ones do you want?" I didn't say, "Should I take these down?" Assume the sale. Which ones do you want? He bought Meet the Parents and a few others, but I always liked just finding things to help people. I started a lawn care business, and that was another way to help people. I just knew I didn't want to have a job, and I'm so glad you're talking about doing the things that are a natural segue into it, because yeah, who wouldn't like movies, drawing, and doing this? Fashion. I've thought about starting a label before. People actually thought I had one for all the suits I've worn over the years. They're like, "Where do you get these? Are they yours?" I'm like, "Yeah, if you want to think that, go for it."
Yeah, it's funny. I too used to make flip books. I loved making flip books, and that was, as a matter of fact, the old Nickelodeons. If you look back at film history, those were essentially flip books. They weren't reels of film. They were single pictures that were dropped back really fast, and that's why they also had that kind of stuttering motion. But they were really fun, to do. And you called it lawn care. I called it mowing lawns.
Mm-hmm.
There were in growing up in Akron. I mean, you're the Midwest also. You
Absolutely. And
know
you mentioned
what?
Wisconsin.
Yeah, that's where I went to college, University of Wisconsin in Madison. And when I was a kid, the summer was the spring and summer were the time to mow lawns, and that's how I made money. And when there was a snow day,
Oh, absolutely.
going door to door shoveling driveways. That was another
Green
thing.
cash and white cash.
There you go. That's right.
Probably shouldn't say white cash now as an adult, but
As
it
in
was.
snow, as in snow.
Yeah.
And so, it's funny because I was always trying to figure out ways that I could make money doing something that I enjoyed, but also to have some spending money for the weekends and stuff like that. So, uh, my parents taught me early on that, you work for what you get. And
Absolutely.
so that was just part of what I learned growing up. It was no harsh thing, you know, uh, it was just, you work, you're paid for your work, and then you do what you want, with that money. And that was that was an important, basic, but good lesson, in terms of that, because then I had to be resourceful in how I would do things. And I knew that people paid other people to shovel the snow on their driveway. Why not pay a kid from the neighborhood to do it?
Absolutely.
It was
Some
that
people
kind
pay
of
the
thing.
locals now.
Well, yeah, that's true.
And I
And
wish
it's
there was
fun.
more of them. It seems like there's a lost art. Like if everyone wants to be a TikTok star or YouTube star, and it's like there's a ton of people looking for great people to just trust them.
Yeah, I mean,
Great people
social.
can do the work, but when you're hiring, I just had to let someone go, and I'm bringing some new people on board. But it's like I think the skill set anyone can learn. Obviously, the more you know, the better. But I
Mhm.
just want some people I can trust. Most of my team has been 10, 15 years. I've at least known them. Some have worked with me 8, 10 years, 2, 3. Like, I don't like, I like people I like. And if I can't trust you and I don't like you, I'm probably not going to hire you.
Well, and trust is an essential glue in business. If somebody's going to pay you to deliver a product or service, then they need to trust you. You can make that first sale, and you can, of course, lose the trust because the sale doesn't live up to the promise. But I think that trust is an important, very important component of business. And if you're an entrepreneur and you're looking to grow a business, you have to. The only way you grow a business is if people pay for what you're doing or what you're offering. And the only way they'll pay for it a second time is if they were satisfied the first time. And
You're
you
bringing
know,
more value than it costs them.
well, or at least the perception of, yes, they're happy with the purchase. And that's what's important, and that brings about trust. You look at that then from a 35,000-foot perspective, and then you start realizing that if they trust your business, you can start offering other things, and they're going to be much more welcoming or open to trying those other things you're offering too, because you've won their trust. That's called licensing, or setting up, other businesses. So that Nike started off just selling running shoes, and
Mm-hmm.
then they got into apparel, and they got into all these different product lines. And the reason they were able to do that is because people trusted the running shoes, and they trusted what they bought. So whenever you see a recurring label, whether it's Nike or Ralph Lauren or Tiffany or whatever, they've established a trust in their brand, and people are open to trying new product. They aren't all going to work, but you know, people will be open to trying other things that you're offering if you have won their trust.
Like with, I'm thinking of the iPod with Apple when that came out.
Mm-hmm.
Microsoft had the Zune or whatever. No one really cared. Apple had their version of it. Obviously they're both MP3 players. Oh no, mine's not MP3 player. It's an iPad. Whatever.
Well, the interesting thing is that the iPod, what you're talking
Mm-hmm.
about, is actually that sort of took over because of Apple's brilliant marketing savvy. Was not the first such product out there. The first product was the Walkman by
Mm-hmm.
Sony. And I was one of the first people to have a Walkman. I met with Akira Morita from Sony,
Okay.
and uh, I was one of the directors covering Fashion Week in Paris. And so when I met Morita and his wife, who was very much into fashion, they gave me a Walkman. At that time, it was cassette tape, and they gave them out to I don't know how many people, maybe 100. This they weren't called influencers back then, but it created this curiosity. They wanted me because I was covering like 15 different collections, and they gave it to high profile fashion journalists and photographers and so on who were going to a bunch of different shows. And people are wondering, not just fashion people, but just people on the street, what are they walking around with headphones on for? What's going on there? And so they went with influencers, if you will, and that got the Walkman a lot of traction. They built that up, but then when Morita died, the Walkman pretty much died, and they stopped innovating. And Sony made computers. They could have done that little hard drive. It went from cassette tapes to CDs to then just a hard drive. And the Walkman came in brilliantly marketed. They took a whole different approach than Sony did, and created this product that for years was just a juggernaut, and it became like Walkman was. It became the generic name for that product. But Sony was essentially the Apple of its era. It had the
Yeah, I
coolest
remember
designs.
when I was doing those lawns, I had the Walkman on listening to a lot of it was self-development stuff. It wasn't music all the time, but um, it was just cool. And then when the iPod came out, I'm thankful for it. Don't get me wrong. It kind of helped bring about the industry for podcasting. I know it wasn't the first thing. Some people think it was, and it was around prior, but it absolutely accelerated it. And I mean, you're just so casually covering all these names and big companies and everything, and it's kind of cool. But at the same time, at the end of the day, how big of a role does that innovation play in the industry you're in, or do you think you can just skirt by without it?
I think that that's a really interesting and complex question, and I'll tell you why.
Good.
Uh, for decades, Bell Telephone controlled communications, both business and residential. You had to have a Bell telephone. They had a monopoly. The monopoly was broken up. And as a result, what happened was the biggest innovation in telephones was in my lifetime when I was younger was it went from a rotary phone to a
Mm-hmm.
touch tone phone. It's not that big a deal, it's and but that was it. Once the monopoly was taken apart, and by the way, Bell would also sue any company to try to do any accessory that went with the phone. So, for instance, there was this plastic little bowl that went at the bottom where you talk into the phone, and it would keep conversations private. So the person
Oh,
at the desk next to you couldn't hear what you were saying.
that's kind of cool.
It's
I
kind
was
of
just thinking of
cool.
the that rest that you can props up on your ear so you can walk around like.
Yeah, but then, when you were at work, you didn't walk around. You might have bent over to open up a file drawer, but you weren't walking around with the phone. They weren't wireless. It was still had a
Yeah.
cable to the phone. And so the innovation in God, 80 years was really minimal. Once the monopoly was broken, like that item I told you about, they sued the company that made that little plastic ball that fit at the bottom and put them out of business. And that's what they would do.
Jeez.
So think about the innovation where now they aren't even really phones, they're computers that have a phone function,
Right.
you know, and think how much you can pack into that. You're carrying around more computing power than what it took to land the first lunar module in your pocket, and however it's affected the camera business and everything else. But so we've hit a real technological era, and so upgrades in software and continuing to innovate, upgrades in, the phone design, which has really slowed down. There used to be huge upgrades all the time. You had to buy the new model. Well, now people are holding on to their phones longer. So Apple's waiting longer, Samsung's waiting longer to release new models, because it gets pretty expensive if you're spending $1,400, $1,800 on their top of the line phone. It's a status symbol for a lot of people, and they want it to last a little bit longer. But innovation's crucial for any business. You do have to define innovation, because innovation isn't just a new product, but how do you make something work better, enhance the value of it, make it desirable so people are going to upgrade. Part of that comes from a certain planned obsolescence, which was started by Henry Ford. And what I mean by that is they don't want their phones to last 20 years. Could they? Yeah. But they don't want them to, because they want you to buy new phones. And that's true with computers. That's true with all of this stuff. So the innovation's got to be seductive enough, and what they build them with it's just not going to last that long. And that's enough.
Keep the cost down too with the materials. I remember microwaves, dryers, fridges, all that stuff. Some of them would be 30, 40, 50 years old, and now it's like, unless you're spending thousands and thousands of dollars,
Yeah.
maybe it'll last 10.
Well, that's the planned obsolescence. Henry Ford used to go around scrap yards where cars were dumped, and he'd look at his cars and he'd see that, well, the pistons gave out, but the engine block was still good. So what he would do is reverse engineer whatever was the first part to fail. He wanted everything else to pretty much fail around the same time, because then you have to buy a new car, and so it wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't that he wanted to make the cars better. It's that he wanted people to have to buy more of them more often. So it's really interesting when you look at the history of business. You look at the history of some of these companies, and what they did, and that extends to pharmaceutical companies. Just about all. You have to have a reason to keep purchasing, and planned obsolescence is a big part of that. I mean, when you had the landline at home, you had the same phone for the whole time you were growing up, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And that's not the
I
case.
remember the rotary too. It was always entertaining, but kind of annoying when you had to reach someone quickly.
See, I wanted a rotary cell phone. And the first app that I downloaded was the kind of ring I heard when I was a kid. I mean, people that were music would play or whatever. I wanted a real phone ring like what I grew up with. So I still have that. I love that. But yeah, it's really interesting when you look at technology, you look at innovation, and you also look at the other side of innovation, which is uh, innovation is crucial for companies to continue and to survive. And innovation, by the way, can be telling a new story. If you're making a movie, I mean, there's innovation comes in many forms. It's not just technological.
Do you think that could be your team too? Not just new products or a marketing campaign, but innovating your team and how the interculture works?
That's essential to innovation. You can't, it's not a one person job. So if you're innovating for a major company, you have to give them a compelling reason to invest in the R&D necessary and the risk necessary to introduce a new product. So you need a team that is aligned, and that's really crucial in terms of building a business. And that's true even in a small company. You want people who are all sharing the same mission. So innovation is, I believe, a commitment and a mindset within a company to want to constantly be iterating on what they're doing to make it better, more useful, whatever.
We have to be updating it. Don't have the phone on the wall for the next 20 years.
That's exactly right. That's right.
And I appreciate you sharing what you did about Henry Ford. I mean, I live in Detroit, Motor City, grew up here, did not know that, and I've watched and even gone to some of the places and everything. It's reminded me of Jay Abraham's like 3 ways to grow business. I'm like, that is a very interesting way to increase buying frequency.
Well, the other thing that they did, I mean, well, I'm happy to go in any direction that our conversation takes us. I don't want to get too far afield for your audience, but the other thing that
Go
was
wherever
done,
you want. I'm enjoying this, and it's adding value.
well, thank you, is that, I wondered, well, so why were the automobile companies in Detroit, Motor City, as they call it?
Mm-hmm.
Why was that? And the stock answers, well, there were ports there, for shipping and so on. Well, that's not really why. Ford was from Detroit. And so that's why the businesses started there. We have a lot of port cities that have friendlier weather than Detroit. So you look at why companies started where they started is also really interesting, but there were literally a few hundred automobile companies at the early part of the 20th
Yeah.
century.
But
And,
you also had all the steel from Ohio and Pennsylvania and the.
Pitts and yeah, that's right. That's right. And so, what was interesting was that what they did, I mean, some of the car companies failed just because they were not good. Other ones failed because General Motors and Ford were able to shut them out of the market. And, it was cutthroat, and it, came down to just a few automobile makers. So, it was a killer business. I mean, Ford sent in basically a militia to defeat unions. But he also was smart that he priced cars so his employees could afford them because he knew that creating a volume business was the future of the automobile.
And the
It,
$5 a day working,
right.
$5 an hour, plus the what was the other thing I think he is credited with, the 8 hour workday, 8 for work, 8 for sleep, 8 for recreation.
Yeah, I didn't know that. But that's it. That's interesting.
Because I think a
Uh,
lot of the companies at the time were like, they were getting in trouble because they were working the people so hard unwillingly. I think now it's more of a, we still want to push the limits, like we were talking about with the mental health. It's like we want to push the limits, but we don't want to break the rules. So we're not going to force you to, but if you do show up, there will be an incentive as a thank you. So people feel compelled to do it. But I know companies back at that time, they were literally just like horrible working conditions. And if I'm correct, I believe he was one of the first ones to say, "Hey, we're going to make it somewhat enjoyable. We're going to pay you." I think most people were paying 150 to 250 a day, and he was like, "Pretty much screw it. Let's just double it or triple it, whatever it was." And
well,
people were just flocking to him.
one of the things was, which was very smart business, is who's going to buy the cars if they're too expensive? You're going to have a very limited market. So the more that you get the cars bought by a wider public, and when you're employing as many people as them, and people see that many more Fords on the road, that must mean they're a better car. So there's marketing
Big
involved in
advertising,
that.
marketing.
That's right. That's right. So, all of that stuff is fascinating. And the interesting thing is, and I do this in my class, it's in my book, is breaking down the walls between these different businesses, because the practices and the protocols of businesses are very much the same. And that's whether you're talking about, you referenced Pennsylvania and Ohio, the steel
Mm-hmm.
that was used, well, that's what we now call supply chain. And so supply chain and difficulties in the supply chain and shipping issues, have caused inflation in our current economy, scarcity of goods, which raises prices, that sort of a thing. And the thinking about that is no different than it was in Henry Ford's day. It's really interesting when you break down. So, what's the real thing that's causing these issues that we're having to deal with? And they're the same thing. So I
And
find
it's
it,
always going to fluctuate regardless of the economic times or the era.
Well, fluctuate in terms of scarcity, demand, what the market will bear, competitive landscape. You know, if you're a big enough company, you can cut prices to basically put your competition out of business.
Yeah.
And that has gone on and continues to go on. And that's just another business strategy. What can you do? The thing that happens, this is true in drug companies, and it's true also in a lot of tech companies, is innovation stops. And the way that they innovate, so to speak, is that they buy up smaller companies who are potential competition, and they buy them up so that it can enhance their bottom line rather than be a competitor. So that's why Facebook, bought Instagram.
Thinking of them, and
Right.
also the Oculus a few years ago.
Yeah. Well, we all know
The
where that
VR
went.
stuff, and
Yes.
if you look back, it's like you see they buy up 10 companies in the VR space, then magically the next year, hey, we're doing this metaverse thing.
Right. That's right. And so the tactics don't change in business. And see, that's what I think is so interesting is if you can look at things with a broader view and knock down those walls, which are really artificial, between what businesses are, you get, I think it fosters a greater understanding. And it also, as a business person, increases your opportunities. Because maybe in thinking that way, just like you thought of Oculus and see that, I love context and I love what are the antecedents to that? What came before that? So, most people under 35 don't know the Walkman, but they know the iPod, that's now gone. It's because you don't need it because of your phone, right? But and what Apple did that was so interesting. This is an interesting contrast in advertising and marketing. Is first Sony was the only game in town, so they captured that market and created a market for your own personal life soundtrack as you walk down the street, right, or exercise. When it was co-opted by Apple, where the two were advertising at the same time and in a head-to-head competition, what Sony did was show you the compactness of the design, how much stuff they were fitting into that small space, and that marvel of technology.
You don't need a
People,
boombox anymore on your shoulder.
that's
It
right.
fits in your hand.
But the interesting thing is that what Sony did, which was, what Apple did in contrast to Sony, which was showing the technology and how compact, and they would show the drawing of it, the engineered drawing, and all that about the Walkman. Sony showed that. Apple showed the fun you had
Mm-hmm.
when you were listening to your iPod.
Thousands of
Yeah,
songs in your pocket.
exactly. And then that kind of animated thing of the guy dancing.
The cord from the earbuds.
Exactly. Exactly. And so, so what Sony did was show the technology and feature that. People don't care. And what Apple did is they showed the fun, the user experience, which is how Apple from day one built themselves. They stole the operating system, the what you see is what you get graphical user interface, the GUI interface.
UX.
That's correct. That's right. And that was a great court case because Apple tried to sue Microsoft for stealing their operating system. And at one point, it's probably one of the only funny things that Bill Gates said was, how could we steal it from you? You stole it from Xerox. But it's really interesting because Apple early on was smart, and this was Steve Jobs, to focus on the user interface. And what do you want when you're using the iPod? You want to have fun listening to music. Here's what it does to you. It's fun. And that was really smart. And I think part of the battle was lost simply because Morita, who was the real visionary for Sony, died. And so, and Jobs was young and coming up and full of ideas, a very smart brand steward, a very smart marketer. He really knew how to get attention for his products, how to build anticipation and do that. And again, that's another form of innovation. How you market, how you get your things out there, what the user experience is. There's all kinds of different innovations. So I find that all just really fascinating.
I absolutely do too. I love looking this stuff up. If I wasn't around for it, I love learning about it. Obviously, we weren't around for Henry Ford and all that, but just learning. I've always had this penchant for learning, and I think it's why I gravitated to starting my publishing company, because I always read a lot of books as a kid and liked learning and helping other people. And it's like the more you know, the easier it is to learn. And with what you're saying with all these great companies, it's interesting to see the backstories. One of my things is always looking up, like, who's the parent company? Like when you said limited brands,
Right.
or there, especially like GM or Ford. It's like, well, what other ones do they have? Lexus and Toyota. When I was doing primarily modeling and acting, I was working with Lexus, which is the high end brand for Toyota. And then at one point, Ford had Jaguar. So it's like that context you were talking about, building it out around it, really shows more of the bigger picture than just any one small avenue of it. And I love that you're bringing up the innovation, and I love that we're mixing the business and the creative side of it. And I know that's what your book and course is all about. Why do you think creatives have such a hard time with the business and vice versa?
Well, I think there's a few things. That's a great question, Mario. And the reason is a lot has to do with our culture. And what I mean by that is that if you're going to be a lawyer or an accountant or a doctor, nobody says to you, well, what's your fallback position? But if you say, like I guess you were going for at one point, well, I want to be an actor. Well, what's your fallback position? Because you some
Starving artist, right?
exactly, which is Picasso didn't starve. He was incredibly wealthy in his lifetime. There's a great story about Picasso, which is he was at the Café de Dumagot in Paris, and I actually heard this story when I was sitting at the Café de Dumagot,
Oh, wow.
and a woman came up to him and said, it's my daughter's birthday. She has always loved your work so much. Would you mind just doing a quick little thing, on a napkin? It would mean so much to her. So he does something very quickly, and she goes to pick it up, and he slams his hand down on top of it. And he said, that's $15,000. And she said, $15,000? That took you less than 20 seconds to do. And he said, no, madam, that took me 65 years and 20 seconds. And I love that because it was loading all of his experience into that allowed him to render something so quickly and so effectively. And I thought that was really cool. And that he was a savvy businessman. And I think that, our culture has taught us that, well, you're either creative or you're a business, but the two don't mix. Well, they're essential. And, in my class, I tell my students that a knowledge of business is like the martial arts. How do you strike the most efficient blow to protect yourself so you can continue to do what you love doing? And I think that, well, I don't think that business and a knowledge of business is an essential survival skill for any entrepreneur. You need to know those things in order to be successful as an entrepreneur. And I don't buy into at all the idea that you're one or the other. I'm creative, I do business. And I'm not saying that in bragging, I'm saying it's a survival skill. If I want to do the stuff I'm doing, I better figure out a way to make it profitable so that I can do that. And that knowledge that I learned early on has carried me through my fashion business, through my film production business, through the play that I am doing. It's that knowledge brings me forward so that I don't get taken advantage of, or there's a lower likelihood I'll be taken advantage of. And so I think that is really critical. And the thing with your creative expression is that whenever you put your ideas out there, there's a high likelihood you're going to get criticism, insulted, made fun of, or whatever. And I think that people's creativity shuts down as a self protection mechanism pretty quickly. I was lucky because my parents encouraged my drawing. You know, they had the retail stores and they bring home big sheets of craft paper that I could draw whatever size I wanted and do stuff. And I could put it on my walls in the bedroom. That was my room. That was, you know, my bat cave, if you will. I could have anything in there I wanted. And they encouraged me to do it as long as I was doing that stuff and I was happy doing it. But there were teachers that I had that, you know, would be highly critical and mean. And, you know, and even there's peers, you know, that will make fun of something because anything that challenges established beliefs, you're going to get blowback. And so it's having the fortitude for that not to destroy you and to find your voice and be true to your voice and put it out there. And I think that that's really critical.
What if you're afraid to do it? You know, business has a lot of risks. You want to be the creative and have the successful business, but you know, all these people you're talking about, and I wish they would be nicer because I've gone through it too, and it's not fun. But how do you find the way to get past it? Is there anything that intimidates you, and how do you get past it if you feel it? Because you work with some of the largest brands in the world, uh, some of the biggest actors, actresses, all this stuff. The music videos I know you do, the production. Victoria's Secret, you have the most beautiful women in the world, and I think to most people that could be intimidating. Is there anything that intimidates you, and if so, how do you get past it?
I'm, you know, if you put a gun to my head or a knife to my chest, that's can be intimidating. In terms of business, it was funny. Ralph Lauren and I were having a conversation probably 30 years ago. And, you know, I worked with him for like 36, 38 years. And uh, he at one point said something to me about, you know, something that, you know, he wanted different, didn't really like. And uh, and I said to him, he said, "Jeff, can you do that? Are you afraid?" I said, "No." And he kind of smiled. And I said, "Ralph, what's the worst thing you're going to do? Beat me up? You know, you fire me. And then I get a job someplace else. I find another client, you know." And he laughed. He liked that a lot because that's kind of his attitude is he's got his terms. And that's one of the reasons he's been so incredibly successful is he has his terms. And you can't always stick to your terms and you have to compromise certain things as you go through. But as a general rule, he's pretty strong about what he does. And he was very good at calculating the risk. Most of the things we get involved with, if you try to calculate risk and you look at one is very little to no risk, 10 is catastrophic, life changing, you've really screwed things up. Most things are like threes, you know, twos, threes. And if you really go through it, because at the moment when they're looming, it can seem huge. But in reality, if you look like we've been talking about this whole time, context and bigger story,
Mm-hmm.
it's pretty small, you know. So I think in assessing the risk, to me, it's always been more of a risk to not do something because that can be a tremendous missed opportunity. But as you're in business longer, as you get older, hopefully you also gain something, which is the wisdom to choose your battles. Because it's not always worth, you know, going to the mat for something. And that's
Yeah, like we were
why,
talking about earlier on with the when I said, "Do you think you can grow business that big without catastrophic fallout?" And to me, it's really, can you still have a nice life, a family, and still have a nice life and it not just be all work? Because I don't think all work and no play, you know, that whole thing, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. But I'm very huge on family and friends and relationships, and I couldn't just do one or the other. And yeah, at times it's been hard because it's like you want to do this, but you can't be in two places at once. I haven't figured it out right now, at least. Um,
Right.
but to me, that's the catastrophic. If you have to give up your life and your soul for it, it's not worth it.
Right. But are there people that you may look at that it appears they have given up their life because all they do is work? But their work is something that gives them such satisfaction, fills a certain space that's critical to them, and maybe they never wanted kids. You know,
That's true.
that's a
But for
real
them, it's
decision.
for them, it's not giving up anything
That's right.
that was important to them because in their scenario, through their lens,
Exactly.
that is their life, and they're doing exactly what they want.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think we have a tendency to look at things only through our own lens and
You can't
not
do that.
right. You've got to have that kind of sense of others, that you understand how they operate. In working with crews and working with models and working with actors and all that kind of thing, I think that the other essential ingredient, which we touched on before, is that you have to win their trust, earn their trust. And then if you violate that, it's over. I, for whatever reasons and the way I am, I was always able to gain that trust with the models or with the actors that I'm working with or whatever, because I had the bigger picture, but I also had the sensitivity to their needs, their vulnerabilities, and so on. And of course, I got better at that as I got older. Because also, when you're younger, you're always trying to prove yourself and show what you can do. And as you get older, some people say, well, did you mellow? And I said, no, it's not mellow. I got smarter. I gained more wisdom. And you only gain wisdom by experiencing things and by screwing up, but nobody can tell you you're going to screw up. You have to screw up and suffer
You
the
got to take that risk.
consequences. That's right. That's right.
And
You know,
hopefully, you learn something from the last time that got screwed up, and this one works out, or at least is less of an impact.
that's right. Exactly right. And so I think everything you do informs everything else you do if you enter into it. And you were touching on this before with what I think are essential characteristics. For me, essential characteristics is, to me, if you are curious and you have that just insatiable curiosity about all kinds of things, which clearly you do, if you have a sense of humor, if you are intelligent, and if you have empathy, care for others, we're going to get along. I don't care what gender you are. I don't care what age you are. I don't care what your sexual preference is. I don't care about any of that, because to me, it all comes down to those personality traits. And that's what's most important. And if you're lacking those, chances are we won't get along. Or, if we're doing business together, I'll just stay away from
It's
certain
going to
of
be
your traits until the job's done. Right. And then I don't have to see anymore. But
Well, I was saying recently on another episode, it was like, be excited. When you call someone, be the type of person that they're excited to answer the phone for. They're more excited when you walk in the room than walk out of it. Because there are
mhm,
absolutely people where it's like, oh, so and so's here. You want to go yet?
you're right. That's right.
That's not a good following.
No, no, and definitely it is a big plus uh, in life and at work if you're the kind of person that people enjoy being around, or at the very least, you're not causing problems. And it's usually very needy people that cause those problems. Uh, where it'd be great if they worked out some of their issues in therapy rather than on the set or in a meeting. But I think that's really important. But I've become, I think, more understanding to a certain degree. It doesn't mean I want to be around it, but
But you get it. You get it a
yeah,
little bit more.
yeah, yeah. And again, that's just the openness to experience other things. And I think it's really essential that people feel heard and that they feel validated. And if you look at people as just, gears in your machine, I don't think that's good. And I don't think ultimately it's even going to help your business. And I think a lot of people look at people as those kind of gears, as opposed to other human beings that have feelings and have difficulties and have all of that kind of stuff. So,
Like,
I've
where
been,
should I go talk to the cogs in the wheel? Where are your minions at? Like,
yeah, and I think that when you are dismissive of others, I mean, one of the things that got me when I would start going out to business dinners when I was in my 20s, early 20s, and I would see people who were totally dismissive of the wait staff. And I thought, you're an asshole.
yeah.
Why do you treat people like that? They're just doing their job. And, there's just signals you get, as you go through life. But anyhow, I think that curiosity, trust, listening, uh, empathy, curiosity, and humor are essential in life and in business.
So it's safe to say the people in your book, the people you work with, everyone from your career, they're all the right people. You're obviously not going to highlight someone you didn't like or didn't want to be around, right?
No, there might be there's certainly people, some that I like more than others.
Okay.
Uh, but, I try to cull in my book and in the class, I try to cull the useful wisdom that they have. And I try to vet people well enough. I've never had anybody that I didn't think brought something really good to the class. And people say to me, well, who's your favorite guest? I said, the one that I have now. My latest guest is my favorite. And I try to enter into it so that every time I'm doing it, I'm feeling fresh and excited to be talking to them because I learn along with the students, which is fun. I love that. And so no, I would never have. There have been people that have wanted to do my class, uh, and that I didn't want to interview them because I didn't want to give them a platform for the things that they had to say that I did not think not only were not valuable, but they got joy out of being provocateurs
Hmm.
and just things that this is not the platform for that. If you want to debate somebody on these kinds of things, that's not my class. My class is how do you bring useful information to the students and have an open dialogue that can help them navigate their life. That's what's interesting, and I'm not interested in their particular agenda. So if they aren't willing to do
Especially
that,
if it's salacious.
oh yeah, or if it's salacious, or if it's exhibits a kind of bias that I don't think is appropriate for the classroom or, for the conferences I'm asked to be in or whatever.
I
It
can
doesn't
relate
have to
to
be
that.
salacious.
I can relate to that 150%. There's something I started right when I launched the show, and because I have a wait list of 150 plus people trying to get on, and sometimes I'm just like, it's not that you're not qualified, it's just that I don't like you. Plain and simple. I
Right.
mean, I think they're qualified, but I'm like, I don't know. One of the things is like, would I want to go to dinner with you? Can we
Mhm.
hang out outside of the work thing? Are you a cool person? Obviously, you need to be qualified and stuff, but it's like, yeah, someone. It's like, hey, we're working together, we're cordial, it's nice, and other people, it's like, absolutely not. And then other people, I'm like, I can't wait till we're done. Like, you seem really cool. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that who you include in your life, who you spend time with is critical, but there's going to be people that you don't necessarily care for. Uh, I have a rule. It's funny when I
What's
when
that?
I when I hired my director Sheldon Epps for the play, who's tremendously talented. I've learned a lot from him. He's great. And I had interviewed a bunch of directors, and I said to Sheldon, "I really like you. Uh, but you have to know this about me. I have what I call the no asshole rule. And he kind of laughed and said, I think I know what you mean, but why don't you tell me? And I said, if you're paying me, you can never be abusive, but you can be an asshole to a point. If I'm paying you, you can't be.
Mm,
And he laughed and said, we have the same rule.
I like
And
that.
that's kind of how I look at it. I was years ago, I was doing a big commercial for Victoria's Secret, and one of the cinematographers whose work I have tremendous admiration for was Vilmos Zsigmond. Vilmos did McCabe and Mrs. Miller. Uh, he did Close Encounters of the Third Kind. He's been nominated for more Academy Awards than any other cinematographer. I think that's still true. He died a few years ago, but an amazing, amazing cinematographer. And so I called Camera Service Center in New York because I knew that one of the guys there had worked with him a few times. And I said, what kind of guy is Vilmos? And he said, what do you mean? You're checking him out? I said, yeah, because I'm thinking of hiring him. He goes, well, he's a fucking legend. And I said, true, but if he's an asshole, I'll hire a legend who isn't. And I ended up working a few times and becoming friends with Vilmos. And he was phenomenal to work with, and he was really great. But that's kind of my attitude. You don't have to put up with or reward by paying bad behavior. And, I think that bad behavior needs to have consequences. For me, the consequences are I don't hire you. I'm not going to work with somebody who is mean to people, rude to people, requires so much that they draw away from the job itself, which we're all as a community working on to draw attention to themselves. I don't want to be around that. And so the consequence is I don't hire you if that's what you're like. And working with Vilmos was a total joy, and he was great. But I've always had that kind of filtering in terms of who I want to work
Yeah,
with
that's
because it's
that's
not
good.
worth it.
That's important
I
because
think
so
so.
many people just go, and I don't want to say so many people, but I've seen people over the years where it's like they're just hiring people to fill a spot or just
Yes.
for in the sake of a podcast or show or whatever.
Right.
I'm just gonna hire someone because I need someone, or I'm just gonna have a guest because I said I'll go live Thursday at 3 and I need someone, and it's like I think it just really lowers the quality. I've never put anyone on I really truly didn't think wasn't gonna be good.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's so many great people out there. It's like why?
Right.
And that standard of excellence, I've you can see it through all of your work. And as far as your book and the training, because I know you've been at Parsons since '07
Yes.
with, and I'm going to say illustrious career with your illustrious career since the '80s, '70s, '80s, and '90s. What made you go? You were already established. I would just venture to say you didn't need to do this, correct?
To do what?
Teach it to teach.
No, I didn't need to. I mean, no, I didn't need to.
What inspired you to do it?
Well, this was something I was actually able to work my way into because I was asked by another professor there if I would come and speak to his class.
Okay.
And I did, and it went really well. And the students really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. And I got invited back, I think the next like 6 semesters. And always had a good time with it. I always enjoyed it. And he said, there's an opportunity here. They need an adjunct professor. Uh, and I think you would be great. Are you interested? And I said, well, I don't know, because I can get a phone call and be away for 2 weeks. So it's got to be really flexible. And he said, well, I think that the school will work with you. Why don't you just try a third of a semester? Do it for 4 weeks. I said, okay. What I didn't know is that there were three of us, each of us taking a third of the semester. And then they were going to make the offer to one of us. So I didn't even know there was really a competition going on. But I did the class that I would want to teach. And then I got offered the position, and they had been very flexible with me. I loved doing it, led to me writing a book. And, you know, I enjoy teaching. And I even taught when I was in college. So I had taught before. And that was a really interesting experience back then, in which until one of the things about writing a book is it becomes kind of therapeutic because
Hmm.
it surfaces memories and interactions that I had all but forgotten about. And if I wasn't in that headspace of delving into things to add my own story into this, into the book, I wouldn't have even thought of. So it was an interesting process on all accounts. But I believe that fundamentally good ideas need to be shared. They need to be gotten out there because it can help somebody, make somebody's life better. Uh, it can do something, I think, positive when you share good ideas and also when you challenge bad ones. And I think that that's really important also. Because I think when bad things are said, uh, if you are silent, it can be read as being complicit. And I think it's important to stand up for what you believe in if certain rights are being threatened.
Yeah, I agree 100% because all it takes for evil to prevail is good men to do nothing.
Exactly. That's right. That's right. And so, I think for me, teaching is, I get the stock answer is often people say, well, I like to give back. I get a lot from it. I love it. So I don't think that I'm giving back. I think, wow, this is another way for me to extend my learning, to scratch that itch of curiosity, to share and stay in touch with younger people who are coming up and their ideas. So I'm learning from them too. So it's all of those things that I do it. I'm not doing it out of this altruistic, well, I want to give back now. No, if I didn't enjoy it, if I didn't love doing it, I wouldn't be thinking about giving back.
I took the same approach writing my book, and I tell people all the time I don't like anything I don't love. It's like lukewarm is not, it's not even good for food. Maybe leftover pizza, but yeah, you
Well,
got to
now
have
that
that passion.
well, leftover pizza, it depends on where it's from and if the crust has gotten soggy. There's
Toast
a
crust,
certain, yeah, that's true. That's true.
recrisp it a little bit. Excuse me. So I wanted to ask you. I know we're going to be wrapping this up shortly, but I wanted to ask you so many things. But one of them was Ralph Lauren to Victoria's Secret fashion show. I'm sure there's similarities, but what was it like producing one over the other?
uh, well, there were different considerations. Ralph Lauren's show was strictly a fashion show,
Okay.
and that it was Ralph's opportunity to present to press and buyers. There's no public that's invited to it.
Okay.
And so, in a sense, it's a trade show, but the presentation, and this started happening back in the 70s when I first got into doing videos where fashion shows weren't videoed, uh, it became marketing content. So the production value of shows, which used to be pretty low, got to be pretty high. We would build sets, the music that accompanied the show. A lot of thought went into it that didn't previously because it gained so much more publicity and was an opportunity to market the line so much more. And when I was initially selling it, it was also that while the buyers are waiting, you could play the video in the waiting room of your showroom. You could have video set up in your boutiques in the stores or your own stores. And so I showed them a lot of ways to amortize the cost of the video. So I wanted to make it necessary and hard to say no to. Uh, with Victoria's Secret, we were doing a TV special. So, the entertainment value had to be much higher. Uh, and we weren't catering to buyers because Victoria's Secret owns their own stores, and we weren't catering to press because our show didn't get reviewed. You know, the lingerie they made didn't get reviewed in the fashion press like Ralph Lauren or Armani's collection or anything like that. So there are very different kinds of things, but the dynamics of producing the show were very much the same. What's the set? What's the soundtrack? How long is it? How long does it take for the model to reverse the runway? How many changes can you have? How many models do you, all the cost factors and everything else that goes into it are the same. But in terms of the creative approach, you know, they're different because we're playing to a lay audience through a TV set, essentially. So the at the Victoria's Secret show, the audience was essentially props. You'd hope, you know, you get celebrities there, so you see them on the red carpet, and it's kind of exciting. But the real audience was the global audience that the show got distributed to. Where with the fashion shows, there was a global audience, but it was the fashion audience, and it was just different. Both were fun, and both had their challenges, and were both really interesting to do.
Do you think if people aren't putting on live events that in business now, if they're not doing live events, they might be missing that marketing component and that extra publicity side of it? Because when I've put on VIP book launches for people and even my own, there's photos in my book from the event I did. I had videographers, photographers, I was promoting it, and I absolutely went in going, I want that promotional asset for years to come. And a lot of people that would ask me, should I do? And I'm like, yeah, here's all the great benefits. They're like, what costs extra for that? Well, obviously, but I love how you said, even with Ralph Lauren, you focused on the ROI for them.
Yeah, I think that, you know, we've had safety concerns regarding live events that were never a component before. So thinking up alternative ways like Zoom, uh, you know, it was incredible, the resourcefulness that went into how do we keep doing business. I mean, here in New York City, and I'm sure it's true in Detroit also, like the outdoor eating spaces that a lot of restaurants created, which was a survival mode. They had to do that in order to, you know, either have curbside pickup or you could eat outdoors, but something just so they could survive. And a lot of the, you know, theater and all live venues, including conferences like yours, were very hurt during that period, and there wasn't an alternative. So you had to think of how can I use Zoom or some other form in an innovative way to make the conference still worth watching and worth participating in. The cost to the person staging the event is less because you're not dealing with hotel coordination, meal coordination, all the different kinds of stuff that goes with that. And I know some people who I work with that their conferences became more profitable on Zoom because they were still delivering the same content value, but they weren't, yes, a lot less overhead. The thing is, ultimately, we are social beings. We want to be around other people. Most of us miss being around other people. And, you know, I think that unfortunately, COVID's not over yet, but I think a lot of people neglected their responsibility to others in terms of, you know, we're all in this together. Wearing face masks is not a political statement. It's you're trying to stop the spread of disease. There's a lot of people who aren't ready to go to live conferences yet, or live theater or concerts or anything like that. So, you know, you think of
Even theaters
alternatives.
are affected.
Of course, they were very much affected. I mean, the numbers are there. They're very much affected. And it took a major star like Tom Cruise to say, no, this is not going on streaming. This is for theaters. And we're not going to release it to any streaming service for a while. So if you want to see it, you see it there. And I can't say that I never saw the original Top Gun. I don't really care about it, but I want to go see it just because it's supposed to be so much fun. And so I think that what you lose in these conferences by being on Zoom is those spontaneous moments. Even if you do breakout rooms, which I think are
Yeah,
great,
lunch.
you know,
Maybe
yeah,
grab food and just hang out.
exactly. That's right. and those things that happen like that when you're hey, and you recognize somebody and you start to talk, which would have never happened otherwise. So, again, it's a balance in what works. What do people feel safe doing? What are they willing to pay to do? And you have to tack with the times and what that is. So I think we still haven't settled into what the world's going to be. Lots of people have gone back to offices because, they miss it. They miss their colleagues. A lot of their social life is around work or getting together with people after work or stuff like that.
Yeah, especially if they have a passion for what they do.
Yes, that's right. And but there are many people that learn that they don't need the overhead of those offices, and for that particular kind of job, they can save that overhead. We don't know yet where this is going to end up. It's still very much in flux, and you know, it's going to be a while before we really know what the impact is, what's the lasting impact, as opposed to dealing with crisis impact.
Well, I appreciate your insight on that because I know there's a lot of businesses, want to get ramped up and do all kinds of different things. And yeah, I still feel like stuff is different than it was. And, you've done some of the biggest shows around for years. And that was the other thing. It's not just that you did them one or two times. You said you worked with Ralph Lauren, what, 30 some years?
Yeah, worked with
What
him
about
for like
Victoria's Secret? When did you start with them?
worked with him like 26 years.
Yeah,
I like building relationships. And again, going back to what we first talked about is when you establish trust, uh, you know, Ralph said to me, it was a huge compliment. He said to me at one point, I can hire whoever I want. I said, I know. And he said, but I chose to work with you. And I said, and I'm very grateful for that. And I will always deliver on that. And he goes, I know you will. And, because he could sense that when I do something, I'm all in. I don't know how not to be all in when I'm
hmm
doing something. That's part of being a professional. And so I was very complimented. And by the way, we never had a contract. So, and I'm not advising people work without contracts, by the way, but there was a trust there,
yeah.
and that trust was never violated. And I think, when you're building a client relationship, you always have to deliver on the promise you put out there. That's the only way you're going to keep clients. Too
I
many
agree with
people
that
after it.
because I think that's also a lost. I don't want to say a lost art. It's just lost integrity, where it's like, well, this happened, that happened. It's like, well, find a solution. You said you were going to do it. You
Right,
know.
right.
Um, I have a couple more questions. One of them is the wheel of whatever.
The wheel of whatever.
Absolutely. Do you want yellow or black?
I'll take black.
Okay. Black is a good color.
Black is actually no color.
Absence of light.
That's right.
Where is somewhere you have not been that you would love to go?
Uh, Gosh, I guess I would like to go to India is really interesting to me. I've never been to India. I've been a lot of places in the world, but not there. So maybe India. I don't really have a list of desired destinations, but to try to answer your question in some way, I guess it's that.
Have you ever been to Australia?
No,
Okay.
I'd like to go to Australia too. I even have friends there, uh, but I've never been there either.
Yeah, I think you said Miranda is from there. Miranda
Moran,
Kerr.
yes, she is. That's right. She
I
is.
liked what you were saying on the deck the halls uh the video you made, the one that went viral, that everyone's trying to
Hmm.
replicate this viral thing, and how could you share on that briefly?
We were doing a holiday video for Victoria's Secret, and so I thought we'd have the models sing a Christmas carol as they're decorating or a tree in a room. and they'd wear like Santa helper's outfit. One of the interesting things, by the way, is almost all of the videos that I did for Victoria's Secret, and they were very, very well received. At that time, if you got over 1 million views, that was a lot, and we got multiple millions of views. And I showed the models in a different way. I wanted to show their personalities and have fun with it. So we chose Deck the Halls because I thought, okay, there's a setting here. It's, we're decorating for Christmas. The other big plus was the song's in the public domain, so we didn't have to pay rights for it. And so as the models were singing it, they kept screwing up. And my client said, well, they can't get through the song. What are we going to do? And I said, this. I said, yeah, that's the video. I knew Miranda being from Australia, Dowdson being from, I can't remember if she's from Finland or
Sweden.
Sweden, yeah. And that the models who weren't from the United States, they weren't going to know the song. Alessandra from Brazil, she wasn't going to know the song. And I thought seeing what is usually portrayed as these flawless, beautiful people screwing up and and that kind of stuff you saw in the video, which was all spontaneous. None of that was acted out. That I thought I could put together something that would be really fun in a way that people had never seen the models before. Well, Victoria's Secret trusted me to do that, and it became incredibly successful for them. So sometimes mistakes are what make the piece. That's right. That's
so
right.
Do you think it's easy to create a viral video, or because everyone now, it's like, I feel like, and we didn't get a chance to talk about, but I know you did some of the first live streams for these shows. I'm a huge live stream proponent. My first book is on video marketing, and it was interesting because you have these components, and I swear it's like 80% of people that they think they're going to do 1 or 2 videos. They're like, what are you working on? Oh, I'm doing the welcome video and this, and I'm going to do a viral video. Like, you think you're just going to wake up and you've never done film before and you're just going to make a viral video? Like, that's your strategy? I can tell by your response. I was going to say, how realistic do you think this is for someone who wants to make a viral video? Because I know you've done multiples of them.
Yeah, I would say that if they have that kind of faith, they should just go to Vegas and or buy lottery tickets and take their chance. Yeah, they're anybody that says that they'll create a viral video for you is just full of it. Okay. It's such a combination of the right ingredients that somehow captures the imagination, and that happens, and it spreads like a virus. But people that say, I was at this conference, a panel in this big vision conference, and somebody on the panel said, could I ask that question you're asking? And somebody on the panel said, no, nobody can say that they can create a viral video. And I said, oh, I can. I can create a viral video. And the moderator said, really? And I said, no, but I'll just charge you for it and then make up excuses when it doesn't go viral. Because nobody can claim to do that. And, there's a lot more media outlets, but there's also, there wasn't TikTok, there wasn't Instagram, but though, and Twitch and all this other stuff that I don't even know what it is. But, there's also a lot more competing for the attention.
Would you say, is it safe to say that you also had the right team in place? You also had the right talent in place that you'd already worked with, and there's rapport, and, there's something to be said about that too. It's not just the lights or the cameras.
Oh, it's the concept, and that's what's going to light it up. Did we anticipate that would get the kind of exposure that it ended up getting? Because it ran in its entirety on Entertainment Tonight. It ran in its entirety on the E! Channel, Access Hollywood, Good Morning America, all these shows. Not a clip. They ran the whole thing. The media, if they bought it, would have been prohibitive for Victoria's Secret to ever buy that kind of media. It's, as they say, you can't buy that kind of publicity. And that's what it turned out. Who knew? Nobody did. I did a thing with them with the models dressed as football players. I don't know if you ever saw the football video, which another one was wildly successful. And I felt there was a really good chance that this could really catch because we're promoting it during Super Bowl weekend. And the client liked it so much that they took three or four of the gigantic screens in Times Square on Super Bowl Sunday and ran it on a loop. And I used body doubles and stunt women and all this kind of thing to make the football playing seem plausible and real. And it was just fun. And that, that one I felt like, I think we've got something here that's really going to be cool, but you never know. You never really know until it's out there. I mean, nobody does this stuff and puts it out there and thinks, this will be mediocre. I mean, you're always hoping it's going to be something good. And, I've been fortunate enough that I've done a number of these that just captured people's imagination and it worked for the brand.
Yeah, and I'll also say to your credit, you had the foresight to not drop it or change it and say, no, we need to go with this because, okay, so maybe you didn't plan it to a T every last detail as far as the virality of it. But if he's saying we don't, if the not the director, your client was saying, well, they're messing up, and he could have said no, or you could have said no, and that would have been it.
Yeah, it was. You have to have confidence in your ideas. That's really important, but you can't be delusional about your ideas.
Okay.
That's also important.
Okay.
And then there's a certain point. This just happened with the play in March. It was opening night. We had a full house. And some people came up to me and said, so are you nervous? I said, no. And I said, you're not? I said, no. I said, oh God, I'd be going crazy if I were you. And I said, look, I have faith in the material. I have faith in our cast, our crew, all the work that we've put into it. And it's 15 minutes before curtain. There's not a fucking thing I can do anyhow. And, so I think I've
that optimism, but that realism, like what's going to happen? What are we going to do? Change everything now?
Yeah, exactly. Like this is the way it is, so I'm fortunate that I'm able, and I think it's because of just having been through a lot, to realize, something, there's nothing that I can do now. But I did have tremendous confidence in all the different parts of that it was going to work. And fortunately it did. But even if it didn't, there's nothing I could have done about it at that point.
Well, I appreciate all your insights. I wish we had more time. I've thoroughly enjoyed this. Thank you for sharing your wealth, your wisdom, and just being so gracious with your time. I know we've been talking about your book and your play. Is there any direct websites? We're going to make sure it's in the show notes and everything, but where would you like to have people look up more?
Well, you can get the book, which is Creative Careers, Making a Living with Your Ideas. It's available at Amazon and all fine booksellers. And I'm proud of the book, and it's a good reflection of the class. And that's good because of so many of the great people that I've had in my class. You can check out my production work at madoffproductions.com. You can check out on LinkedIn if you go to B. Jeffrey Madoff and just hook up with me there. I post clips. I don't even know if you've seen it, Mario, but I post clips from my guests such as Damon John and, wonderful people who have tremendous insights into business. And I'm thinking Damon John because I'm posting him all week this week. And I just have terrific people that you can really learn something from. And there's also on Instagram at the @ a creative career. And then just for the fun of it, since you talked that you like photography, I do Yeah, I don't pay any attention to Twitter. I wish I could wipe the whole thing off. I don't, I stopped posting on it. Uh, it's, yeah, I just don't do it.
It's just
Uh,
there.
yeah, yeah. And I probably should, but I don't think it's the right platform for what I'm doing. If I was doing something,
And that's
it
an
was
important distinction to make because some people think I need to be on all of them just because everyone says I need to be on all of them. But it's like,
right.
where's your audience at?
Exactly. That's exactly right. And but on Instagram, if you go to Jeff underscore Madoff, what I do I love this city. I love New York. And I take long walks every day and I take pictures and I post a picture a day of just New York life. And it's not for business, it's not for anything but pleasure. I only put up what I like and I think is cool and fun. And it's all black and white photography. And I think you'd enjoy it since you're into
I did.
photography.
I did see it, and I thought that was the Twitter, but it's your second Instagram account I was thinking of.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And there's actually an Instagram for Madoff Productions too. Uh, but that's the best way.
I'll make
Follow
sure
me
all
on.
that's in the show notes so people can have direct links to it and everything. And I want to ask you real quick about your course. Is there any way, and if you're not in the class, is there any way that you can watch it online, like in its entirety, or do you have any online courses that complement it that you can people can take as well?
At this moment, I am in deep consideration about doing an online course based on my class. There's not a place to watch it online, but I will be actually posting the interviews in their entirety, not just the clips. I'm redesigning a whole portal and website so I can put that because I've been asked that question a lot.
Okay.
So I do plan on doing that. And I've really enjoyed speaking with you too. It's like been sitting around with a friend talking, and you ask great questions, and I've really had fun doing it. And I think the only solution is just have me back on.
Well, I'd be happy to, and I've enjoyed it also. And even before we started, you said, "Well, I guess I can only go downhill from here." You have not, sir. You have only went up, and it's been my pleasure and joy.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate it.
All right, Expert Authority World, we have another great episode here today. I'll see you on the next one. Have a great day, and God bless.